When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. You understand me? I was born black. I live black. And I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey, man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
I just want to be free. Peace to the family. This is Ikemba Ojore coming live at Direct with another one at you. You was here last week. You know, you tapping back in. Welcome back. Karibu, welcome to everybody that's here. If you missed it last week, make sure you go back because we, or at least I had a powerful discussion. So you don't want to miss that. So subscribe and like, share, subscribe. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. And check out those videos for sure. But I'm going to try to come at you every Sunday with something new representing African Black history all day and combating revisionist history. It won't always be historical conversations we have, and maybe some well, everything's politics, but it may be some current affairs that I will be discussing. But for the most part, I'm going to be hitting you with some history. And the zone that I'm in right now is just combating a lot of misinformation out there that is harmful. Harmful to us in particular because it creates a divide within the Black community, particularly because you have Black people who are parroting European or colonizer talking points. And that's an issue. And so today I want to address this long-awaited, video. I kind of wanted to touch on this topic, perhaps a year ago, but I'm finally getting around to it. And there's no time like the present. So welcome to We Charge Colonialism. Again, like, share, and subscribe. If this is your first time here, welcome. We are a Pan-African media and think tank, and part of the work that we do is combating the colonial education or miseducation and colonial media. So it's very important that we have these platforms. Shout out to Black Power Media, which you can also find me on the Rise Up Morning Show over there. So make sure you subscribe to Black Power Media if you haven't already done so. So I want to get into it because I don't want to keep you guys here too long. So tonight's topic is Anthony Johnson the first slave owner, and something that I think would be there will be an easy answer to this, and this would be common knowledge among people, particularly Black folks. When it comes to our history. Whether it's slavery, history beyond slavery, that we have at least some rudimentary knowledge of our history. So, you don't have to be a historian to know certain, which I would think would be simple facts or common sense. So this idea that Anthony Johnson, a Black man, in a European colony, I'm probably going to be laughing a lot through this, but you know, a black man in a European colony was the first slave owner. You know, I'm taken aback by how many black people are actually buying into this argument. So what I want to do is just show a little bit of the film, because I don't want to think, I don't want you all to think that I'm tripping, that this particular claim or argument that's being made, right, it's like trivial or, you know, it's not gaining any steam or traction, right? The actual video that I'm reacting to has somewhere up to like 1 million views. So there's a lot of people who saw this video. And when you look in the comments, you see that there are a lot of people who are agreeing with the video, with this argument. The crazy thing too is that I'm seeing a lot of white folks in the comments. Not that I'm not surprised, but there's a lot of white folks in the comments that are aligning with this argument. But when I see black people aligning with this argument, it really frustrates me and it annoys me. And a lot of these reaction videos that I have been seeing are black people reacting to these videos. Is this, I see you say Officer Taylor. I wonder if this, I think, because I'm not very familiar with this guy, but I think this is the video that I'm gonna start off with, just to show you guys, like, I'm not tripping. This Officer Tatum guy, is it this guy right here? Is this Officer Tatum? So let me play this. Let me know if y'all can hear this and not. Hopefully y'all can.
Who was the first legal slave owner in slavery history in this country? Who was the first legal slave owner? Does anybody know his name? Nobody know his name? Anthony Johnson. Have you ever heard of Anthony Johnson? What color do you think Anthony Johnson is? He's black. Go look it up. Don't believe me. I know some people. Raise your hand if you think I'm lying. Raise your hand. I'm not gonna get hurt. I'm not feeling gonna get hurt.
Did you know that?
Who was the first legal slave owner in slavery history in this country? Who was the first legal slave owner? Does anybody know his name? Nobody know his name? Anthony Johnson. Have you ever heard of Anthony Johnson? What color do you think Anthony Johnson is? He's black. Go look it up. Don't believe me. I know some people. Raise your hand if you think I'm lying. Raise your hand. I'm not gonna get hurt. I'm not feeling gonna get hurt. Anthony Johnson, first legal slave owner in our history of slavery in this country, was a black man. Go look it up. They got his stuff plastered everywhere. But they won't tell y'all that in school because they needed to be the white man.
He said they needed to be the white man. Who needs it? Who needs it to be the white man? What is he talking about? They needed to be the white man. That was his comment. Yo, loud and wrong. Loud and wrong. I mean, he's so confident in his ignorance. It's amazing. This particular video, so I want to show you the video that's in question right now. So this is the video right here. First slave owner in the colonies, Anthony Johnson, Forgotten History. So the video was made 2 years ago. This video was made 2 years ago. 962,000 views. It's made 2 years ago, 962,000 views. So when you...
As a travel photographer, I'm always...
When you look at the comments in the video, I just want to go through some of these comments in the video. History is not forgotten. It is strategically erased. Right? This is the response to a video that's claiming that Anthony Johnson is the first slave owner. And Colin Heaton, who's the guy narrating this video, who's making this claim, he goes back and forth on what he's actually arguing, and we'll get to that in a second, because sometimes he says first legal, and sometimes he says first, and then he says the colonies, and sometimes he says the colony or Virginia. He might not even say that, but we'll get to that in a moment. You check this comment out. What people just don't seem to realize is that slavery took place centuries before the first residents were in North America. That can go either way. I remember learning this when I was in 8th grade. Several students got up cussing, left class. That would have been me. They were of the same race. They should be in school today. By the way, I'm 65 years old. Make this video go viral now, right? And I mean, as you can see, it's close to 1 million views, right? And someone like this particular video, man, I'll be cool if I get 200. Man, when you're speaking the truth, you kicking the facts, it's a lot difficult. Maybe if I was lying in here, coming with alternative facts, I probably would get a lot more views, right? But this particular narrative, it fits the colonizers' narrative, and that's why they support it. It wasn't forgotten. It was deliberately hidden. This guy said, "I taught high school U.S. history for 35 years. I taught about Anthony Johnson every year." I don't know if this guy's, that's too much right there. My ancestor came over from England as an indentured servant. My understanding is you got to pass this on the ship if you knew the world by signing a contract. To the ship's captain owner, and once you arrived, the captain would auction your indenture contract to the highest bidder. You was under the new owner for the duration of that contract. That new owner could keep you or resell your contract to another owner if your contract was still valid. After you worked off your contract, you was free from indenture service. Then you could start your own indenture contract. He just gave, I don't know what that was, but we'll come back to these comments. But a lot of people in the comments are like supporting this claim and this video, and it's validating their belief. I'm here to dismantle their belief system right now. They'll probably just scroll past this video because I'm about to just destroy everything that this guy is talking about. So I'm not going to show the original video. I'm going to show a reaction to the video, and I won't play this in entirety. I'm just going to go over some of the main points that are being made in this video. And then what I'm going to do, I recently wrote an article which I published today, and I'm going to share that in the chat right now. This article that I wrote is what I'm going to be going over once we look at this, once we finish looking at this video. And peace to everybody that's tapped in. Appreciate y'all joining. Make sure to like and share it too. Let's get others in here. And if you want to join the discussion, come to the stage, definitely let me know because we can have a conversation around this together. All right. So, I mean, even take a look before I go to this reaction. I mean, take a look to all of these reactions to the video and who's talking, right? Black folk. And you look at these reactions, you can see some people are pushing back. First black owner. Most of these videos is people who are in alignment. They're surprised because they just didn't know that a black man was the quote unquote first slave owner in America. Look at this. I'm so angry. First black slave owner in the colonies, Anthony Johnson. The crazy thing is, like, I'm realizing how undereducated our people are. And this is the reason why they don't want Black history taught in class or history taught from a Black-centered view or African-centered worldview. And there's this pushback every time that we look to teach certain topics in the class, right? Teach our experiences in the class, because they'll have to look in the mirror. They have to look at the things that they have done historically to Black folks in this country. These guys, I'm always seeing them like on some conservative right wing, which is sad. These young Black folks, man. But they really don't know. And I want to encourage folks to like read. Like, I study history, right? But even before I took a deep dive into history, there were certain things I knew. The fact that there are Black people who did not know that Black people owned slaves in America, like these people are surprised that Black people own slaves. I thought that was like common knowledge. It was a small percentage. But yeah, Black people did own slaves in America, right? But it was still under a system dominated by Europeans. That was the system. And that's a whole different conversation. We can get into the nuance of that as well, where you have Black people who are about family members and so forth, right? So I'm going to click on this one right here, but you can see this is another person. So I'm going to start with this sister.
Hi there, guys.
All right. So you see the title of this video, her video, "I'm So Mad!" Explanation mark. First slave owner in the colonies, Anthony Johnson. So let's peep how she reacts to this.
Welcome back to another reaction video. Today we're checking out another session from Forgotten History. This one is called First Slave Owner in the Colonies by Anthony Johnson. Without further ado, let's check this one out. Okay. 10th Legion Pictures.
While slavery existed in the American colonies through the establishment of the United States as a country until the end of the Civil War, there have been many misconceptions about slavery in general. Most Americans are not aware that there were some Black former slaves and freemen who also owned Black slaves, and some became very prominent in politics as well, despite the racial prejudice that existed. Some Black slave owners inherited their slaves from their masters, who were themselves freed in their wills.
Wait, what? Hold on. Okay. I'm getting lost in there. So some Black slaves, if I'm getting this right, they were slaves but bought their freedom and then became slave owners. And some of them got the slaves from their masters in a will. So they were probably very good slaves. And then before the master died, okay, I will all of my properties and all of my slaves to this slave who is now a free man. I did not know that ever happened. I didn't even know there was a chance. No.
We gotta read,
slaves becoming slaves owners. I actually thought
let's make reading great again. Let's make reading great again.
Were born free men. I didn't know some of them were slaves.
Others were either born free or emancipated by their masters and then bought their own slaves, while others were able to buy their own freedom and that of their families. Who were these Black slave owners, and how did they attain such a status in a white-dominated society? What set them apart from other Blacks, and what made them comparable to whites in some of the colonies and later states? What changed in colonial society, altering the status of indentured servants to lifetime slaves?
I want to pause right there. Hear what he said. This is an important question because, again, like he's implying something in this question.
Colonies and later states. What changed in colonial society, altering the status of indentured servants to lifetime slaves?
So you know what he's implying. He's saying that this case, Anthony Johnson, is Johnson and Cashapp case. Anthony Johnson becoming the official slave owner of Cashapp altered slavery, altered like the condition from indentured servant for Black folks to slavery in the colonies. That's what he's implying in that question, right? So this Black man, what happened on this case that's going to change the condition of black folks. That's going to be the influence. It's so just keep that in mind. I'm going to push back.
Who
on all
was
this.
Anthony Johnson?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper.
Yo, and Pete, you see Colin Heaton. Now tell me, how many, I know the folks that tap into We Charge Colonialism, we see somebody like this trying to tell us about Black history, we going the other way. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe that's a, flaw that I have, but there's no way in the world that this guy going to tell me about Black history. It looked like he on a plantation right now, like giving this history. Man, like he looked like he might be the descendant of some slave owners, right? Trying to revise this history. So let's get it. I'll talk about him in a second too. Give a little background on this guy.
History professor, historian, and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Okay.
The vast majority of African Americans in the United States were enslaved. All
right, so I'm not going to play it. He's basically going to give a little history, a little context, right, of like the Virginia colony. And another point, too, I want to highlight is that he's making an argument that Anthony Johnson is the first slave owner in the colonies. Keep that in mind. So we're talking about Virginia, which is one of several colonies. And this is how I'm going to destroy this argument as well. And then I'm going to go around the English colonies, but I'll bring it back to the Virginia. But keep that in mind. He's making that argument. First slave owner in the colonies. So I'm gonna scroll forward to the end. Just peep her reaction to the end of this video, because he's going to make his points. He's going to talk about the Johnson Casora case, and which is something I'll revisit when I go through my article.
When the Irish people have been sentenced to life of indentured servitude, they can purchase their own freedom. But in the case of John Castor, he can't purchase his freedom. Am I getting that right? He can't purchase his freedom, which means he's a slave for life. He's the first person that was legally declared slave for life. And that's because Anthony Johnson filed a case against him. And that's why he is a slave for life and cannot buy his own freedom.
Anthony Johnson was apparently not only the first African American whose right to own a slave for life was recognized in the colonies, he was therefore technically the first actual legal slave owner, regardless of being black or white, as established by the Virginia court. Soon afterwards, slavery was legal in all of the colonies. Later, Johnson moved his family to Somerset County, Maryland, and leased 300 acres for tobacco farming for 99 years, which he called Torrey's Vineyards. When Anthony Johnson died in 1670, that August, his plantation was given to Robert Parker, not to Johnson's children. The justification delivered by an all-right jury ruled that Anthony's land in Virginia that was given to his sons could be seized because he was a Negro and by consequence an alien. As a result, the 50 acres that Anthony had given to his son Richard wound up in the hands of his wealthy white neighbor George Parker. It didn't matter that Richard, a free man, had lived on the land with his wife and children for 5 years. A judge then had ruled that Anthony Johnson, as he was not a citizen of the colony because he was black, but he did own his own slaves, could maintain his property. What soon arrived after Johnson's death was a system of legal slavery in which enslavement was lifelong, hereditary, and based solely on race, and effectively established in all of the colonies in the beginning of the 18th century. As a result, Johnson has been referred to historically as the Black Patriarch of the first community of Negro property owners in America. He was the first black slave owner to be involved in a court case that resulted in an indentured black man, John Castor, to be legally determined as a slave for life. In effect, because hereditary slavery was not in effect during his period of ownership of Castor, the slave for life, and others he purchased, it is arguable that Anthony Johnson was in fact the first actual slave owner in the American
he
colonies.
was a black man.
And he was a black man.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History.
She happy. She learned something. I think she learned something new. Hey, there's so many videos of people who were reacting this way. It was surprised. And now it's just running. They're running with this narrative that a black man being the first slave. Hey, we could talk about the contradiction all day. We can do that. But what we're not going to do is pretend that a black man is the person, the patriarch of slavery, the person who is going to be the impetus behind the legalization of slavery is laughable. Slavery in the United States. So let's get into this, man. I don't want to act like I ain't got the receipts. So I shared the link to this article that I wrote. Should I put it on the screen? That's the link right there. Yeah, why not? I'll put it up on the screen. Let's go. So was the first slave owner a black man? Let's get into this. So the assault on the historical experiences and collective memory of African descended peoples persists unabated, contributing to ongoing confusion regarding our place within the American empire. As Dr. Amerson Wilson asserts in The Falsification of African Consciousness, people who are ahistorical, who have little knowledge of history, are people who are more gullible, more easily manipulated, and people who can be more easily adapted to the capitalist machine than people who are historically knowledgeable. That was a quote from Dr. Amerson Wilson. And I think the proof is in so many of our people who have made these reaction videos and are aligning with this or agreeing with it or soaking in like the misinformation, rather than the first thing before they even made the video, they should have did some at least some cursory research, some surface research to find out if it's true or not. You could probably do a quick Google search and see that the information presented in that video was false. So the colonial education system has systematically undereducated and miseducated African Americans, severing generations from a critical understanding of their own history. This has culminated in the continuing oppression, exploitation, and degradation of the Black community. In the contemporary era, the proliferation of digital media, particularly YouTube, right, has become the primary source of information, as someone had put in the chat. The primary source of information for many, often compounding historical misrepresentations and contributing to the intellectual impoverishment of society. Many Black people have become victims of deliberate distortions of the Black historical experience. The very subject of this essay exemplifies the dangers of such misinformation. European Americans have consistently sought to dismiss, discredit, distort, and diminish Black history, acting in the service of interests that preserve white supremacy and maintain control over Black populations. Recently, a troubling revisionist narrative has emerged, attempting to place a Black man at the center of the development of slavery in America. This essay engages critically with this claim by examining the broader context of slavery's evolution in the English colonies. And so here, I give a chronology of slavery, particularly in the English colonies, though. A chronological review of English colonization in the Americas is instructive. You have Jamestown, Virginia, 1607, Bermuda in 1612, Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is founded. This is when these places were founded. 1620, New Hampshire, 1623, Barbados, was established, not founded, established or colonized, right? 1625, Massachusetts Bay Colony. 1630, Maryland was colonized. 1634, Connecticut, 1635. These early settlements are crucial to understanding the origins and expansion of racialized slavery that this essay will analyze. So first thing first, the Spanish set the precedent for enslaving Africans in the Americas, initiating the transatlantic slave trade as early as 1501. It was therefore European powers long before the establishment of the first English colony who pioneered and institutionalized chattel slavery in the New World. Contrary to revisionist arguments, Europeans were engaged in the enslavement and trafficking of Africans for over 2 centuries prior to English colonial presence. Yet, some contemporary commentators, such as Colin Heaton, whose YouTube video inspired this essay, argue that Anthony Johnson, a former Black indentured servant, was the first legal slave owner in the English colonies. And so a bit about Heaton. He holds advanced degrees in history and European studies, is also the author of particular 11 books, but this book in particular, The Four-War Border, The Century and Life of Pieter Arnoldus Kruller, a biography, which is a biography chronicling the military exploits of a South African soldier. A Boyer, right? He picked, out of any story he could have done, biography he could have done, he picked a Boyer from occupied Tanzania, South Africa, which is an interesting figure to research and write a book about, right? And if we know anything about, and this is a guy, Pieter Kruller, someone who served in the military, fought in the Boer Wars, fought against the Zulus, right, to occupy Africa, also trained guerrillas to fight in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia at the time, which would become Zimbabwe, right, to fight against the insurgency fight against the insurgency to overthrow the colonial government, right? He was training soldiers to fight against that. So basically, this is somebody who's holding up the white power structure, someone who is a racist, a white supremacist. This is the guy who is telling us about Black history, right? Who is telling us that a Black man is the first slave owner, right? This is the historian who's giving us this narrative, right? So it's important. Anybody who's familiar with historiography, because the study of history is one thing, but historiography is just as important as studying history. And historiography it could be defined in 2 ways. Historiography is the history of histories, right? The histories of histories. For example, if we are looking at history on the history of World War II, all of the histories, the collection of histories, volumes of histories on World War II will be considered the historiography. But historiography is also the study of the particular philosophies of the people who are writing these histories, right? And so anytime you are doing any research and you studying any history, always, when you're looking at those secondary sources, always understand the philosophy of the people who are writing those histories. Now, I didn't do a deep dive into who this person is, but I found that very interesting, for him to do that research. So notably, the book offers little in the way of critical engagement with the pervasive racism and violence of colonial society, focusing instead on military history and thus leaving crucial questions of racial ideology and its consequences largely unexamined. This individual is the person propagating the narrative concerning the identity of the first slave owner in America, a narrative that many accept uncritically and without rigorous examination. So Anthony Johnson, the person in question here, an Angola who arrived in Virginia in 1621, eventually gained his freedom, acquired property, and became a tobacco farmer. By 1651, Johnson had established a small estate and notably owned enslaved laborers. The case of John Custer, a Black indentured servant, with contested legal status culminated in a 1655 court decision ordering Cassapp to serve Johnson for life, a ruling that some historians, including Colin Heaton, identify as the first judicial determination of lifetime servitude in the English colonies. However, this narrative requires deeper scrutiny. And I'm gonna tell you, like, most of the research that I've done, like, on slavery, and particularly slavery in Virginia, none of the academic articles or books that I've come across has this position that Anthony Johnson is the first Black or even legal slave owner in the colonies. So I just want to say that. So I'm curious on where this argument is coming from, like and I mean, what it is at the end of the day is basically their interpretation. He's making an interpretation of the information that's in front of him, which is something that he can do, but it's not aligning with the facts, though, which I'll get into. This discussion is not a matter of trivial critique. Rather, it is an effort to correct the historical record and ensure accuracy in our understanding of the past. In this video, he in comments commits several substantial errors. Notably, he titles his video First Slave Owner in the Colonies, right? Again, colonies, plural. So he's not just talking about Virginia. He's talking about the English colonies, right? And I'm gonna bring Barbados into this conversation. But even if I don't bring Barbados, if we're just saying the mainland colonies, all right, fine. North America, fine. But I think it is significant. I think it's important to understand, like, Barbados is the blueprint for the rest of the English colonies. And this is part of the British Empire. You know, it's all falling into that sphere or that domain of their control and power, right? So I think it's important to discuss what's happening there. And many of the enslaved Bajans, right? Many of the enslaved Africans that are in Barbados are going to be transported into the Americas. The same that will happen when the English take over Jamaica, right? Those enslaved Africans in Jamaica and Barbados, Bermuda are going to be taken from those colonies and brought into the mainland colonies, right? Enslaved Africans, and those enslaved Africans, because they weren't indentured servants, they were enslaved Africans. Those enslaved Africans, that was their status. They didn't leave those colonies to come into the Americas to have their status changed into indentured servants. But we'll get into that. So he titles his video First Slave Owner in the Colonies, and he asserts that Anthony Johnson, a Black man, was not only the first legal slave owner, but also the first slave owner in the English colonies. Overall, and I quote, this is what he says: in effect, because hereditary slavery was not in effect during his period of ownership of Cassapp, the slave for life and others he purchased, it is arguable that Anthony Johnson was in fact the first actual slave owner in the American colonies, and he was a Black man. Furthermore, Heaton suggests that Johnson and Cassapp case served as the primary catalyst for the legalization of slavery in the colonies. He implies it in this question, and which I mentioned before. He asks this question: what changed in colonial society, altering the status of indentured servants to lifetime slaves, and why? This is the question he asked in the beginning. And the conclusion you're supposed to come to when you finish the video is that what changed was the Johnson-Cassapp case in 55. So in 60 and 61 is when you're going to first have laws passed in Virginia, 61 particular, making the condition of the mother, the condition of the mother is going to determine the status of the child. If the mother is enslaved, then a child born in that colony, born to that mother, would be enslaved as well. But this already existed, right? And even I want to say Heaton in his video, he admits himself that slavery wasn't legalized until 61. He admits it himself. So, and these are Europeans who are making these decisions. These are Englishmen who made the decision to legalize slavery in the colonies. But prior, a point I was going to make was that the condition of the mother passed on to the child prior to the codification of that in 61. But again, it wasn't on the books. It was de facto. You had de facto slavery. You had the condition of the child following the condition of the mother was de facto. So all of this was happening in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, before 55. So the entry of enslaved Africans into Virginia occurred as early as 1619. While there is ongoing debate regarding the precise status of these individuals, whether indentured or enslaved, the institution of lifelong bondage for Africans was already developing in parallel elsewhere. Barbados established the English colony in 1625 is particularly significant. In 1636, right, do the math, it's 19 years before the Johnson case. 1636, a political directive decreed that all Africans brought to Barbados were to be treated as lifelong chattel, unequivocally establishing perpetual slavery for Africans under English colonial rule. That's in 1636, right? This predates Johnson's legal case and demonstrates that English colonists were not only active participants in the slave trade, which is another thing, but also early architects of race-based hereditary slavery. New England. Let's move to New England. So I'll give somebody who wants to argue, well, that was Barbados. We're talking about the mainland colonies, which the colonies at the time, which will expand to 13 colonies, the original 13 colonies, that will become the first states of the United States of America, right? If we want to make that argument, right, I can make that argument as well. So New England, too, saw the rapid institutionalization of slavery. During the Pequot War of the late 1630s, Native Americans were enslaved, and by 1638, the first documented case of Africans arriving as slaves in Massachusetts occurred with the ship Desire. Right. So Connecticut, just to give some quick background, you had the Pequot War. After the massacre of the Pequot Native Americans, you had Native Americans who were going to be sold into slavery. So they're going to be pushed out of the colony of Massachusetts. You had Pequot that were in Connecticut as well. Those were sold into slavery, and the request was that enslaved Africans be brought back from the colonies, right? And so you had that first ship of Africans being brought in 1638 into Massachusetts. Connecticut's 1638 records also document the enslavement of Africans, while Massachusetts General Court's records from 1636 reveal the legal sanctioning of slavery for captives. That's in 1636. These are the English colonies. So how does Johnson become the first legal slave owner in 1655, where you have the general court records are showing in 1636 revealed the legal sanction of slavery for captives? Harvard University itself, from its founding in 1636 through the abolition of slavery in Massachusetts in 1783, was built and sustained in part by enslaved labor. In 1641, reiterate, that's Harvard, 1636, right? In 1641, the Massachusetts Body of Liberties became the first legal code first legal code in British North America to explicitly legalize slavery, 15 years before Johnson's case. This code sanctioned enslavement for lawful captives taken in just wars and for foreigners sold into bondage, influencing legal developments in other colonies. Right. This is what the record says. 1641. It's the Massachusetts Body of Liberties that's going to become the first legal code in British North America, and it's this code. It's this that's going to influence legal developments in other colonies. not Anthony Johnson, right? So you have the first legal slave owners right here in New England. Not where I'm at. I'm not in New England, but so let's continue on though. By 1646, the New England, by 1646, the New England Confederation had codified the practice of exchanging native captives for African slaves, further entrenching chattel slavery across the region. The evidence is unequivocal. The legal and social foundations of slavery in the English colonies were established by white colonists well before Johnson could source case. Before I move on, let me pull something up because even, I mean, if you look at Harvard has pledged $100 million, right? $100 million to what they said, but they pledged $100 million. It's as a result of just like the history of slavery. They pledged $100 million, not necessarily to the families or anything. Let me see exactly where that money is going. Slavery, yeah, Harvard legacy, because I know they're not sending that money to black folks. That's the last thing white folks want to do. Give us reparations, right? So again, like showing this right here also just gives proof that, you know, these places outside of Virginia, because he did say the colonies. So when we moved to New England, right? Harvard was, I'm not going to say it was built off, but Harvard in its development, African people, enslaved Africans, contributed to their development in different positions, whether it's building, as janitors, whatever the case may be, right? So it says Harvard committed $100 million to redress its ties to slavery after a historical report released Tuesday found that slavery played an integral role in shaping the university, right? So that's Harvard. The first president of Harvard in the 1630s owned a slave by the name of the Moor, and I want to bring that up as well. Nathaniel E. His name is close to the guy who's pushing this narrative, Heaton. So Nathaniel Eaton, first president of Harvard, owned a slave. So when we talk about the first slave owner, it's Europeans all day. So we look at this guy right here. Harvard presidents and faculty enslaved more than 70 individuals, some of who labored on the campus from the university's founding in 1636 until slavery ended in Massachusetts in 1783. Nathaniel Eaton, Harvard's first president, owned a slave known only as the Moor, who likely served the university's earliest students. Right? So somebody want to bring up Anthony Johnson, bring up Nathaniel Eaton. Ask him about Nathaniel Eaton. Right? So go back to this. Hey, I mean, that is true indeed. True indeed. Who cares when 99.9% of the slaves own? Who cares? 99% of slave owners in America were European. So we should run our people for clickbait. This smoke screen to fill pockets. Absolutely. To fill pockets, man. That's capitalism for you. It's sad that I even have to have to even make a video like this. I'm doing this for prosperity, though. We ain't gonna allow we're not gonna allow for the revisionist history. So the narrative now shifts to Virginia. The focal point of the current historical debate is important to clarify that this essay does not dispute Anthony Johnson's status as a slaveholder. Rather, it challenges the assertion that Johnson was the first slave owner in the English colonies, a claim that is both misleading and a fundamental distortion of the historical record. And also, John Winthrop, go back to New England, John Winthrop, who was one of the founders of the Plymouth and Massachusetts colonies, right? He was also a slave owner. These are guys who owned slaves before there was a Anthony Johnson on the scene. A closer examination of early Virginia reveals a much more complex and troubling reality. As Robert McCauley outlines in the seminal article, Slavery in Virginia, 1660, a re-examination, the extent records of early Virginia, particularly county and court documents dating back to the 1630s, offer clear evidence regarding the status of Black individuals in the colony well before Johnson's notable legal case. These records indicate that a significant number of Africans and their descendants were held in lifelong servitude. Even if the law had not yet been systematized, racial slavery in explicit statutory terms. The first documented Africans arrived in Virginia in August 1619, brought by the English privateers who had seized them from a Portuguese slave ship. While some sources have characterized these individuals as indentured servants, the boundaries between indenture and slavery were, in practice, ambiguous and often determined by the will of white landowners and colonial courts. In fact, according to the research done by McCauley, the terms slave, servant, and Negro or nigger were used. We still call each other that, don't we? But anyway, slave, servant, and Negro were used interchangeably to refer to enslaved Africans and were often determined by context. By the 1620s and 1630s, the Virginia colony's labor force consisted of both European indentured servants and Africans, but the latter group faced increasingly severe restrictions and longer terms of service. So when you look at the records during this period of time, depending on the context, if they were selling on the auction block, terms such as slave may be used. In other contexts, they may use servant, but they were used interchangeably as well as Negro or nigger. In the records, if you look at some of the wills, and some of this, I have the documents, articles for all of this, but it'll be too much for me to go over right now. But in some of the if you look at the wills, some of the court documents, when they're referring to the indentured servants, they will say they would make a distinction between indentured servants and Black folks. Black folks would be just niggers, indentured servants and niggers. Why are they making these distinctions? And and these are things. I mean, this can be argued, right? Why they're doing it. But even if you're looking at the Africans who came in 1619 on the ship, the White Lion, records show that some of those Africans who were on that ship were still enslaved more than 10 years later, and their children were still enslaved. If they were indentured servants, they would have already served their time. There's records of at least two of those Africans that were brought on those ships that their labor passed on, or their what do you call it? If you want to say indentured servitude, their servitude passed on to the children or the son of the father, who would then own the children of those enslaved Africans, at least two of those that were on that boat. The point I'm making is that this is not consistent with white indentured servants who would serve a term maybe 2, 5, or even 7 years. Okay, they're playing. I'm in the urban city. I'm making sure people aren't fighting outside. So, hey, hoodoo, Conrad, what's going on? Hey, I'm just doing a breakdown, man. I'm doing a breakdown. Join in if you will. Let me share a link, man. Because I'm wondering if folks got some thoughts. And anybody who wants to challenge, I'm up for that too. If anybody wants to challenge the idea of Anthony Johnson, man, I would love to have that conversation. Maybe that'd motivate me to pull out some of these articles. But continuing on with this article, so county court records from the 1630s revealed that Black Virginians were often denied the limited rights afforded to white indentured servants, such as the right to eventual freedom or land ownership. Many Africans and their children born in Virginia were retained in servitude for life, sometimes under the pretense of unending indenture, but in effect as slaves. For example, court rulings from this period show Black individuals being sentenced to lifelong servitude for minor infractions or simply by virtue of their status as Africans. By the 1640s, the transition from ambiguous indentured servitude to explicit racial slavery was underway. Anthony Johnson wasn't the motivation or the impetus behind racial slavery, right? The distinction between white and Black people was already being shaped by law, and lifelong slavery existed well before the Johnson-Casor case. The truth is the development of a tobacco economy, along with an increased demand for a permanent labor force, is the cause of the rise of African slaves in the colonies. But thus, the historical record is clear. Long before Anthony Johnson's civil suit, over John Casor, Black people in Virginia were already being held as slaves, sometimes for life and sometimes across generations. Legal slavery was taking place in other colonies as well as de facto slavery. The notion that Johnson was the first to hold a person in lifetime servitude is not only inaccurate, but it also erases the broader context of how racial slavery was being constructed and enforced by white colonists and the colonial legal system. Early Virginia was, from its inception, a society in which the enslavement of Africans evolved rapidly from a practice of convenience into a foundational institution well before Johnson's name ever appeared in the legal records. And then we go to finally to the story of John Punch. So even if we want to, if everything else is just vague, I don't think any of it, though. We go to New England, we can go to Connecticut, we can go to Barbados, right? We can go to these other colonies to show that there's legal slavery, right, already taking place. And we can see even in the records, early records, that you had Africans who were, if you want to make the argument that it wasn't legal, but at least de facto, they were serving a lifetime in servitude. But if we want to talk about legal cases, the John Punch case, when we look at this case, right, and they'll even have an argument for this, but this right here shows that even if we're looking at legality, John Punch is going to become technically the first legal, if we want to use this argument, right, court rulings, the first legal slave in the colonies. In 1640, Punch, an African indentured servant in Virginia, attempted to escape bondage with 2 Europeans. When apprehended, the Europeans received additional years of servitude. Punch, however, was sentenced to lifelong slavery. Right? So here we in 1640, there's already this distinction, right, between Black and white folks in the colonies. What's happening in Virginia in the early 1600s is going to be the foundation of the racist institutions that are going to develop in the United States, right? This is happening in Virginia when they're making this distinction. If a white person lays with a Black person, they had laws in the 1630s, 1640s, that white person would be punished for laying with a Black person. Right, so they're already making these racial distinctions. So you have racism, slavery developing alongside with capitalism in the English colonies during this time. When apprehended, the Europeans received additional years of servitude. Punch, however, was sentenced to lifelong slavery. This racially discriminatory punishment marks one of the earliest documented instances where African origin was explicitly used to justify perpetual enslavement. Punch's case laid the groundwork for the legal codification. Punch's case, not Johnson's, groundwork for the legal codification of racial slavery that will come to define the American South, right? And so Hugh Gwynn is going to be who was the slave owner of John Punch. If we're going to use the court rulings, is technically going to become, the first legal slave owner, right, in the colonies. So the historical record is unequivocal. White colonists were the original enslavers in the English colonies. Slavery existed de facto and was later codified explicitly into law, independent of Anthony Johnson's actions. The narrative positioning Johnson as the first legal slave owner is not only misleading, but also a deliberate distortion of history. Such revisionism serves to obscure the true origins of American slavery, placate African Americans, and deflect attention from the persistent structures of white supremacy and economic exploitation. He said it himself that slavery was not official until 1661, when white men decided to make it official. But to be clear, it was not official in Virginia until that time, because as delineated, other colonies have already legally recognized lifelong slavery. Heaton's deliberate inconsistency in his video obfuscates these facts. It is incumbent upon all who seek truth to challenge these distortions, to conduct rigorous research, and to reclaim the history that has been systematically denied or obfuscated. Accepting misinformation about the origins of slavery in America only perpetuates the disempowerment of African descended peoples and undermines the ongoing struggle for liberation and historical clarity. Indeed, indeed. So again, visit wechargecolonialism.org. I have the article posted up there, as well as the last article posted up there. And we're going to continue down this path. I had to get that out the way. That was months in the making. And, hopefully, I'm sure people who are tapped in here didn't really need to be reminded, right? Or to be we already understood this history. We didn't need to be convinced otherwise. But I know that there's a lot of people who are not informed. And based off of the videos that I'm seeing, a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge of our history, right? And so, again, we have to make reading again. We're moving into the 100th year of Black History Month, which started off as Negro History Week. We're moving into the centennial of that next month. And we still, many of us are still not reading and still do not have the historical knowledge of what our ancestors went through. So with that being said, man, appreciate everybody for tapping into today. Anybody the link is there. If anybody wanted to come up, give some last thoughts on this before we close out, hurry up and tap on that link. If not, make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed to We Charge Colonialism. And like and share, because even if you haven't tapped in, if they're not tapped in now, they can tap in later. So appreciate you all. Let's make it go viral. Peace, Uhuru. Keep on fighting, man, because the struggle is on.
The white power structure, because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings. The white power structure, to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity, uses tricks. 100 years ago, they could do it with chains. Today, they use tricks. And one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration, to get Negroes, so-called Negro leaders, to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice and